Okay. Hey everyone, if you're there and you can hear me, go ahead and post in the questions channel. That's the only one I'll be paying attention to. And okay, great. Looks like we're good to go. So let me introduce myself. To start, my name is Ryan Holdaway. Friends call me Holdy. You guys can find me in the Slack channel for LambdaSchool. And I'm super excited and happy to be here talking about JavaScript with you guys tonight. A little bit about my background. Let's see, I've been programming for about 5 years now professionally. I currently work for a mobile checkout startup called Skip, and I write the back end for some mobile apps that allow you to go to the grocery store and scan your own groceries with your cell phone, and then skip the line as you're checking out and just pay through your phone. So I don't actually get to write a whole lot of JavaScript with my current job. So this is going to be fun for me to kind of talk about it with you guys. Austin and I have known each other for a really long time. And I've wanted to work with him forever, and I think that this program that you guys are participating in is super cool, and I'm really happy to be a part of it. So while we're talking tonight, we have quite a bit of material to get through. I'll try to go really fast so that we can all get out of here and watch the basketball game tonight. And hopefully we'll learn a lot about arrays and objects and methods and all the cool things that they can do. So, I mean, unless there's any like pressing questions or anything from last time, I'm ready to just jump into it. Like I said, I'll try to keep an eye on the questions channel as best I can while this is going on. And I think that that's really the only way we're going to be able to have any kind of feedback. So if we do, get if I start to lose you, or if anybody has anything they want further clarification on, just go ahead and try to spam the channel and try to get my attention. So yeah, there's 3 different things that we're going to try to talk about tonight. And I want to start with objects in JavaScript. So what is an object? You might be wondering. Let's talk about it. So objects are made up of 2 different types of properties. They can either have just like, raw values, or they can have functions. When an object has a property that is a function, we call that a method. So for now, let's just talk about different regular standard value properties in objects. So an object is just a way of representing data. As you're building an application or a website, you're going to have different types of data that you're going to want to process or display to your users, or handle in other ways in your system. And the way that you do that is with an object. So it's just a named collection of values, properties, methods. So let's use a really basic example here. So if we have a person that's going to be using our system, and we want to represent them in data, we might want to store some information about that person. We might want to know their name. We might want to know their age. I want to know their shoe size. Could be anything that you want. And the structure of this between the curly braces part is the object, and then you guys have seen this before probably, where we just save the result to this variable so that we can access it later and capture and do things with it. So I just want to talk about like the syntax for defining an object really quick. You'll see that it lives between these two curly braces. You can actually nest these and have different layers of properties, but that's kind of like an advanced trick. But then each line is what we call a key value pair. So a key value pair is something that looks a little bit like this, where we have a key and then a colon and then a value. So what makes these key value pairs really nice and really commonly used is we give a name for our property on the left-hand side, and then we get the expected return type value, which is what we put in the right-hand side. So we know that every person that we have is going to have a name, they're going to have an age, and they're going to have a shoe size. We don't really care what the name is, what the age is, what the shoe size is. That's what we're trying to figure out. So when we try to access that in our person, we can do that with this really convenient dot syntax, where we just put a period after the name of our variable, and then we use the name of our key, and that will print out we expect Ryan. So let's run that and see what happens. Cool. That's how we access properties on our object with the dot syntax. So we can add a couple of more properties here using that same key value thing that we talked about earlier. So let's say we want to add maybe a city. Let's say we want to add the types of our values. Here's this another thing for us to talk about. The types of our values can be anything we want. They can be strings, they can be integers, they can even be booleans. And then we just put a comma at the end of like to separate all of our key values. And these don't have to be on their own line, but it makes it a lot easier to, you know, deal with it and just to read if they're on their own line. So my favorite color, blue. Okay, so that's how we build an object and how we add different types of keys, which are properties, to that object. Okay. Now that we know how to define an object, let's kind of talk about maybe some of the things we would use that for. And we'll come back. So, okay. Let's talk about objects. So once you have an object, you can do lots of cool things with it. So let me jump back over here into my code again, and let's talk about adding a function as a property. This will give me a method now on my person object. So in this case, I've taken a first name and a last name, and I store those separately. because I want them in different columns in my database. But sometimes if I want to display that on the, to a browser or something, I'd want to return the first name and the last name together. So I can call a method just like that. That will evaluate this line number 6, and it's going to return the first name with a space in the middle and the last name. And then that's my output. Pretty slick, right? There's so much that you can do with those objects. Oh, looks like we've got a question. Doldman07. What's up, Doldman07? Can we access the keys of an object with bracket notation? Very good question. Rather than tell you the answer, let's just try. Holy cow, you can. It's amazing. Yeah, so he brings up a good point. There's 2 different ways. Well, there's probably more than 2 different ways to access the keys of the values of the properties in your object. And you can use the dot syntax, or you can use the bracket syntax. And there are times when you would want to use one over the other. What's really nice about this syntax with the brackets, I feel like it's probably more powerful than the dot syntax, because you can do cool things like put a variable here in between the brackets and programmatically access things. So I have a code example of that. I'll show you guys what that looks like, but it's pretty cool. Let me see if I can find it here real fast. Here we go. All right. Let me share my screen again. Okay. Oh. Looks like I've gotten ahead of myself. Okay, so I'm really sorry. I got ahead of myself. I probably should have taken some more time to explain what I was doing. This website that I'm at is just repl.it, and this is a multi-language support browser-based REPL. So you can go to this website, repl.it. Just has like a console that you can write code in live and evaluate in the browser, and it's got support for languages. So here's the dropdown. You see it does Python, Ruby, HTML, Scheme, C#, Java, React, Python, Node, a couple other flavors of C, Swift, Rust, Clojure, Haskell, Kotlin. Not going to continue to read this list, but there's a bunch of these, right? So you pick the language that you want to be writing code in, and you can just run it and jump between different languages and just have like this little live notepad to write code in. So for purposes like this, where you're trying to have code run and show the effects to people, or just need a quick notepad to scratch some things down, I really, really love this free, awesome, great website. So yeah, there's a lot of similar tools out there for JavaScript. There's CodePen and JS Fiddle, and a couple of other things. But I think just for like writing straight basic code, this is a terrific one. Okay, Replay 329. Is it fair to say it's a step beyond CodePen? I think it actually is a branch from CodePen. I think the two of them do separate things really well. CodePen is nice because you have a pane for your HTML, a pane for your CSS, and a pane for your JavaScript. So if you ever want to write something where you want to edit all three of those, stuff differently, CodePen is really great at that. What's nice about REPL, I think, is it's more simple than CodePen. It's like a more basic tool. You can just write JavaScript as if it was in a console, and only have to worry about the JavaScript stuff. So I actually think it's the opposite. I think it's a step before CodePen, but for the purposes of these simple demonstrations, I think it removes all that other clutter so we can focus on the JavaScript. And I hope that answered your question. Okay, Gambit has a question. This might be a bit of a random question, but I noticed you have a semicolon after the brackets outside of the key. Is that necessary? Where's my semicolon? Oh, are you talking about the semicolons like at the end of each line? Oh, no, wait. He's probably talking about what line number are you talking about there, Gambit? I mean, the short answer is no. Like most semicolons are not required in JavaScript anymore. But I think this one actually is. We'll see. I don't think that it is, but yeah, it's not required. Yeah, to answer your question, Gambit, it's not required to put that semicolon there. I do kind of feel like well, I don't even want to say that it's good practice. For me, it's just a habit to put semicolons at the end of each of my statements. Those are things that like I want to execute together, and a semicolon just keeps them separate. So it's a style thing. It's not really required, but I do it because it's a habit. I don't even think it's good. That's just what I do. Good catch though. Rudy JM. So with the examples you've used so far, how would you capture the input and store it to use later in these keys? Or is this beyond that lesson? So capture an input like with a web form. An object in JavaScript is similar to a class in Java. An object in JavaScript is very, very, very primitive compared to a class in Java. A class in Java can come with just all sorts of other things. And an object in JavaScript is just like very, very naive. There's only a few built-in methods that belong to the object class, which looks like capital object. Let me type this out. Sorry, I'm getting kind of pulled down a couple trains of thoughts. Let's go down Varco 28, and then we'll go back to Rudy JM. So like a class in Java would be what you were trying to do is give an object a lot of behavior and encapsulating state, things like that. And you can build out JavaScript objects to do that, but I would say that that's all probably like way beyond the scope of this lesson. Um, a, a more similar comparison would be a JavaScript object is more like a hash or a map in Java or other languages. Um, and then back to Rudy's JM. So Rudy wants to capture an input and store it later in these keys. So let's code that up for him. So let's say that oh, I don't even need this. Okay. Let's say that I have a web form that collects some information about my person. What are some things I would like to know about this person? I would like to know we've got an age, we've got a shoe size. Let's go. We want to know. Okay, let's say we want to know my favorite song. Okay. So for right now, we don't know what that is. Print out our person, and it's blank, right? Just blank string. So we build a little web form on our build a web form on our website somewhere where this user, this person can enter our favorite song. And then at any time, we can just update it using the dot or the square bracket syntax. We can use our assignment operator, which in JavaScript is just one equal sign. And then we can set that to our variable earlier. So all we have to do to assign and update one of these keys is to get a hold of the value that we want to put into our object. And then we can use either dot or this square bracket thing. When you do square brackets, you've got to do quotes. And the song is going to be and it'll update it. We can even, and Rudy JM, I want you to watch this one, bud, because you can just make stuff up and you can just put it in like that. So does that answer your question? How you would add things to our object? I'll give you a second to answer because I hear there's a little bit of a delay on this broadcast. So I mean, I think at a really high level, like objects are super cool and super useful, and I think it's pretty obvious all of the different things that you can use them for. Well, I mean, I'm sure you guys can use your imaginations and have like wild and crazy plans of the types of objects you want to build and the things you want to do with them. So I'm going to move on to a different data type, and that would be arrays. Oh, wait. There's some other stuff I wanted to talk about. Jeez. Sorry, guys. Okay, where is my screen share? Okay. I forgot a couple of like really important things about, yeah, my stupid dog. Sorry about that. Okay, so let's say that I wanted to remove a key from oh, you guys are fun. Okay, so let's say I have person. I want to check if there was a key that belonged in there just to see if I knew enough about it. So favorite song, put this one back in, run it. Okay, I've got my favorite song. And now I'm going to ask, so you put in your key like this. I want to check and see if I know what the least favorite song is for my person. So by running that, it's going to give me a true or false, and let me know. Age. That's pretty cool, right? And the other thing I wanted to tell you guys about is how to delete. So let's do that. I'm going to print this out before, and I'm going to print it out after so that you see what this does. Oh, it wouldn't let me print it out before. Let's person. He's got an age. The person dot age, and I've removed a key. See, no more age. Hey, you shut up. Okay. Any last questions about objects before we move on to arrays? Remembering that I'm trying to hustle. Nope. No more age, bad age, wolf. Okay. So the next type of data type that we're going to talk about is it's called the array. Now, an array is really simple. It's just a list of things. It can be a list of numbers. It could be a list of strings. It could be a list of objects. It could be a list of who knows what. And it's a really flexible data type, and it's used typically as a collection that you will either iterate over or just use to store a bunch of values. Real quick, what's the question? What's a good application reason to use delete in that fashion? That's a good question. So if you no longer want to use the key, from your object, what you'll do is you'll you usually set the value to be like nil or a blank string or something, and you'll leave the key in the object. But if you just want it totally gone, if it's something you're never going to use again, that's when you would use the delete function. But I mean, you could just ignore it. if you don't want to. If it can be made with functions and arguments, is it still better to use objects that connect to each other? I'm not sure I understand that question. If a task or app can be made with functions and arguments, is it still better to use objects that connect to each other? Oh, so Ari's trying to start a fight right now. There's many different ways to build software applications, and like right now there's two really popular styles of programming. There's what's called object-oriented programming, there's what's called functional programming. And you know, certain languages are more functional, certain languages are more object-oriented. But like those two ideas are both very stylistic, and the functional approach is where you don't build objects, you don't use methods, you just kind of take data and pass it around to different functions as arguments, and build an application using those tools. And then there's this object-oriented approach, which is where you use objects to store everything. You use methods that are called on your objects, that live in your objects. And those tend to be really heavy with state. So I mean, there's pros and cons of both approaches. A hybrid approach is also very, there could be a good, strong case made for that. I don't think it really matters if you're using objects or if you're using functions, or if you're using them together, as long as like you're writing good code that you can understand. It's really just important to use the right tool for the job that you're at hand. And like, depending on what you're trying to accomplish and the requirements of your application, that's when you would choose whether or not you were going to use objects and build objects, or if you were going to use just a functional approach of, passing around data as arguments and stuff like that. So there's really, the one's not better than the other, and there's really not a right answer for that. It's just all about choosing the right tool for the job. I'll type that up real quick. Okay. Gambit wants to know if it's possible to use different keys in an if-else statement, like if your name is Randy, don't add his age. And the answer to that question is yes. It's definitely possible to use it in an if-else statement, to only set the age of people who either have a certain name, or maybe if they give you their birth date, you don't need to get their age because you can figure it out programmatically or something like that. There's all kinds of times where you could switch your statements and build objects that look a little bit differently. And that's all totally fine, as long as you prepare for it and handle it. So let's go ahead and jump in and talk about array. Array is a really cool, really powerful data type. And I want to just start off by showing you what it looks like, and then we will start using it. So am I screen sharing? Screen share. Yeah, share my entire screen. Let's jump over into this thing, and I think my REPL is in Chrome. Oh, sorry. Okay, so an array, like I said, is just a list, and it starts with a square bracket, and it can contain any number of elements of any different type. So this is my array, and it's just this little list of things. So you'll notice that this can be assigned to a variable with our assignment operator. It starts with a square bracket, ends with a square bracket, and each element is separated by a comma. Okay, so if I take array and want to get an element out of it, I don't have a dot syntax, so I can't. Series popping up here. I don't have a dot syntax like I did with objects, so I can't say array dot thing. But what I can do is use my square brackets to access the index of the element. Now, this is like one thing that was really tough for me to remember when I was first starting out. And that is that array indexes start at 0. So like normally you would look at this array of numbers and you would think like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 would be, you know, array 1 would give me 1. But it gives me 2 because the first element in an array is at the 0 position. So arrays start counting at 0 and then they go up from there. And if you try to access something that's outside the bounds of your array, you just get this nice little undefined, and that's JavaScript's way of letting you know that the thing you're trying to access doesn't exist. Okay, so there are a couple of different ways to play with arrays. And the first one I'm going to show you, and since we're really short on time, I'm just going to copy and paste this code over here. So this is a really functional programming approach to dealing with arrays. Now, we just kind of had our little discussion that Ari brought up in the chat. Do we want to deal with functions and arguments? The map function that's built into array, which is this like dot map method, this is a functional approach. And what this is going to do is it's going to take each element in my array, and it's going to temporarily assign it to this placeholder variable. Okay, and it's going to perform the function that is defined right here that takes this one parameter. It's one argument. It's going to take this the results of that function, and it's going to execute them for each element in the array, and it's going to store the results of each element in the array and then return a new array with the result of this function being called on each of them. So I have a really simple function here that just takes my element, my item, my placeholder variable that gets assigned to each of these values, and it's just going to multiply it by 10. It's going to return a new array. So you'll see real quick that did what we expected it to do, and it just is a way of performing a function based on all of these items. So this is like a really, really useful, like programming trick, this map function, because it's pretty often where you're building an application, you'll have a collection of data of some type, and you'll want to just do something to all of it, and then like return the results or do something with the results. So like a really common thing to do would be to build a collection based on some data. Like if I had all of my persons, all of my users of my sites, and I wanted to print out like a list in there of all of their names, I would build a collection that had all of their names, and then I would like iterate over the list, and I could just like print out their names. I could, insert it into some HTML and build like links or something. There's just like really no limit to this, and this is something that as you're programming, this idea of like building a collection, mapping over it, performing a function on each element is something that you're going to just use all the time, just all the time. So that's something I'd recommend you look up and kind of get really comfortable with, probably before or during while you're working on the homework tonight, is this .map function. Okay, this thing is like silver bullet, and it's going to be really important that you know how to do that. So the other way to iterate over an array kind of looks like this. This is just a regular for loop. So Oh yeah. So this is like the other way that's really common of processing an array. And this is what I would call like the iterative approach. This is using a for loop. So before we can jump into our loop, we kind of just initialize these variables. We have our array here. This is just strings. And like I said, arrays can take, pretty much any type. So you can build an array of numbers, you could build an array of strings, you can build an array of objects. Doesn't matter. This dot length is a built-in method that belongs to the array class, and this will let you get the length of your array. So it's kind of cool. It'll just tell you how many items you have in it. And you'll notice that this gives me 4. It counts the number of objects or items in the array. It does not count, when we're dealing with arrays, we call them elements. It returns the number of elements in the array. It doesn't like count up the letters in the strings or anything like that. So good to know what to expect when you're dealing with dot length. And then this is just a really simple for loop. So I was told that we covered these last week. The for loop, we establish our counter here. So I equals 0. This is our check, and then this is our incrementer. So while our incrementer is less than the length of the number of teams in our array, we're just going to append to this text variable, which is right now just a blank string. So this is going to take our counter, and that'll be our index, and that's how we'll access the array. So real quick, you'll see that what that does is it just prints out the element at each of our indexes, and it goes up by 1 as we go through and increment our little incrementer. Okay, so that's a pretty simple, just way to iterate on an array. You can access the index of your array based on the same incrementer that you're using for your for loop, and then you can perform whatever function you want to perform in here. So we could do, if these were numbers, we could do math on them. We could insert them into an accumulator or some other text string. We could call other functions with them. We could pass them as arguments to other functions. We could do whatever we need to do with just like this little simple iterative for loop. Okay. And then there's a couple other things that are kind of cute that we can do with an array. So talk about just adding elements to an array. There's this dot push method, which will just take whatever argument you have, and it'll add it to the end of the array. You can also use the square bracket syntax and an assignment operator to add an element on the end of an array. And if you get really clever, you can use the length of your array will always be a number that's 1 greater than the largest index in the array, because remember, we start counting at 0. So if you do something like this, you can always just append to the end, because you get the length of the array and you use that as the index, and you can use your assignment operator to put this string on the end of the array. So we can print out the results of all that, and you'll see that each of these 3 lines successfully added an element on our array. Can you use different types in the array, like this array with a string and then a number, an integer, and then another string? That's a great question, Roberto. let's see. Teams.push. Oops, we need parentheses. You see that 1 does show up at the end of our array. So the answer is yes, you can use different types in your array. And there are cases when you would want to do that. Most often, I think your arrays will probably be the same type, but there are certain cases when you would want different types of elements in your array. And you can make that decision anytime you want. Okay, so that is a real high-level overview of objects and arrays and methods in JavaScript. So I have time to take a couple more questions, and then I'll post a link to the homework. So let's see if anybody has any more questions while I go look up the link to the homework. Okay, a couple people are typing. Oh, we're ready for the homework. All right. Well, everyone, just want to thank you all for letting me come out to your boot camp tonight, for talking about arrays and objects and methods. And feel free to hit me up on the Slack channel if you ever want to chat in more detail about these or any other subjects. And yeah, good luck programming.